Olhai. Cherkasy, the city in Ukraine, the administrative center of the Cherkasy region and the Cherkasy district, and also the center of the Cherkasy agglomeration. Cherkasy is the regional center of the central Ukraine, considerable cultural and education center. The city played a significant role in forming of the Ukrainian Cossacks. Stela on entry into the city, Sosnovka. Today there are several versions of origin and etymology of a toponym Cherkasy. According to the Etymological Dictionary of Russian of Max Vassima, the name of the city not necessarily happens from the Circassian settlements. The city could be called on the local Russians who for the first time got into the Cherkasy mountains. Caucasus. On geographical representations of the time beginning at the outskirts of modern Novarkivsk and including both Big and Lesser Caucasus. Transcaucasia. Old historians, in particular 5, and Tatishchev and A. 1. Rigelman. Adhere to the version that the name of the city comes from a word Circassians, one of the coetnonym of the people of the Caucasus and especially representatives of the Attic people which, according to 5, and Tatishchev, made the Piatigorsk banners of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, received lands and joined the Polish Shliata, and began to call the peasants imitating the owners, Shliachticha from Circassians, and wearing the Caucasian clothes. Circassian. By Cherkasy. Subsequently, when Stefan Batory settled, Wallach. Inhabitants of the Danube principalities, including Russinians, and those from our citizens whom we, former kings of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, wanted to execute, as register Cossacks around the city of Cherkasy. These Cossacks by the name of the city and the Cherkasy regiment began to be called by Cherkasy. From Cherkasy output say, P. Znojko's name. He claims that the toponym Cherkasy comes from a phrase of a cheer a team or chur to a pussycat, depending on a dialect. That means people of force or people of army. This determination completely proves the ideas of a Turkic-Slavic unification and fight against Cumans during the Domongolsky period. D. 1. Ilevsky also considered that initially, Circassians, there was exotonymy a Khazar. Presently so themselves called by many Ilibaksky Tatars and Kazakhs of the younger Shus. Both those and others, descendants of Nogais from whom there were Mamay and his descendants as governors of the city of Cherkasy Glinskai's princes. Also Kasimovsky Tatars, originally natives of Cherkasy, have the Nogai origin, though then also many other descendants of Nogais and Kazakhs and also Mishers joined them. G. 5. Vernadsky assumed that the settlement on this place with the same name was in the 11th century, long before emergence of the city of Cherkasy, known on chronicles. Then there was a real migration from the Caucasus in the neighborhood of the territories which are nowadays occupied by the city. This settlement was called Cherkasy from Cherkasy, for Klanskaz. But modern researchers showed that Cossacks appeared not Circassian as Vernadsky thought, and the Armenian names. Then descendants of the Cumans closely related to Russians and Khazars became Cossacks and turned from Church of the East into the Armenian Gregorian belief. It became clear why Cossacks always denied existence any Kaz or Cherkasov as ancestors, and told that Semyon and his Khazar companions, from Poland. Then the Russian land, right bank Ukraine, where the first Cossacks Hazarin, was as a part of Poland, or meant Polish Russia, renamed by modern historians in Glades. A 1. Rigelman. Story by Cossacks Abad. It is mentioned at Evliya Chelebi. According to him, Fortress Cherkasy was based one running from Tatar's belief the turncoat who was called the Cherkasyan. Therefore also fortress named Cherkasyan Kerman. It not a powerful stone construction, but the palanka surrounded with a bulk-earth shaft with a timbered paling which costs on the bank of Dnieper. In fortress about 1,000 houses covered Cherkasy, the monastery with 3 bells. Its benches, guns and arsenal are magnificent, they give great joy. Is nowadays her governor, the damned atheist who gave up on Tatars a certain colonel, he did not dare even to seem to the Khan. Its gifts were also not accepted. In this strength of 3,000 soldiers. And incorrect this fortress, using suitable for the court, plunder and ruin coastal lands of the Black Sea. History. Already in a late Paleo, 10,000 years ago, there was a zone of steady settling and business activities of the primitive person. The separate artifacts found in the territory of Cherkasy near the modern Valley of Roses belong to Mesolith era. 6,000 years BB. Grigoriev is clumsy, 1988. The parking deposits of an era of early Mesolith, in the mouth of the river running on Dukhnovky's outskirts, belonging to Zimovnikovsky culture is also known. 7,000 years BB. Zalizniak Detkin is clumsy, 2004. In the 4th century AD on the bank of Dnieper in the territory of future city. The modern area of Dnieper Hotel. There was a settlement of the Chernikovsk culture. Nearby, behind a stream. Modern Kirov Lane. There was a burial ground of residents of this settlement which functioning is dated about 350-375 AD. It is clumsy, 1995. The history of the Cherkasy lands goes back to Scythians. At the time of Kievan Rus lived to a glade here. Judging by the burials investigated by archaeologists and anthropologists, Slavs and Alana were the main population of this settlement. A small part of its inhabitants were already Christians. Representatives Alan and other nomad Ironoyasichny tribes of Scytho-Sarmatian origin were on service of the Kiev prince, however in the 12th century their tracks are lost, mentions in chronicles are absent. At the time of Kievan Rus in the territory of the modern city there was a Slavic settlement, the ancient settlement which logged in defensive locks fortresses for protection against nomads that it is confirmed by the found artifacts. The weapon instruments of labor coins dated 10-12 VV. The Mongolian invasion for a long time devastated these lands, but over time people gradually came back, life revived. According to the Ukrainian Soviet Encyclopedia, the settlement arose in the last third of the 13th century on lands of the Kiev Principality. About 1362 the settlement was included in structure of Grand Duchy of Lithuania. According to archaeology and to written sources, the city of Cherkasy arose in the second half of the 14th century. The first mentions of the city occur in the Saprasli Chronicle and belong to events of 1394-1395. At the end of the 14th century Cherkasy is mentioned in Annalistic, the list of the Russian cities distant and near, as the strengthened town, was the deputy of the Grand Duke Lithuanian here. The historian 5. N. Tatishchev in Russian since the most ancient times, tells stories about foundation of the city so. The first Cossacks, brought from the Circassian mountain, in reigning cursed to 14 stations where they built the settlement Cherkasy and under protection of the Tatar governors theft and robberies traded. Then passed to Dnieper and the city of Cherkasy on Dnieper constructed. Karamzin in Russian gives to the history of the state other definition. Torquay and Burendy were called Cherkasy. Cossacks also allured to themselves many Russians running from oppression. Mixed up with them and under the name of Kozakov made one people which became absolutely Russian that easier that their ancestors, since the 10th century Obitev in the field of Kiev, already were almost Russian. More and more breeding number, feeding spirit of independence and brotherhood, Kazaki formed the military Christian Republic in the southern countries of Dnieper, began to build settlements, fortresses in these places devastated by Tatars. Krymtsev. Turkov undertook to be defenders of the Lithuanian ownerships from outside and got special protection of Sigismund II, who gave them many civil liberties together with lands above the Dnieper thresholds where the city of Cherkasy is called by their name. Since 1471, after liquidation of the Kiev-specific principality, Cherkasy treats the Kiev voivodeship. Though the descendants of Mamaya who passed into Orthodoxy governed in Cherkasy, Glinskaya's princes, the population of the city in the 15th century. When among Adi in the Caucasus Muslims were not. Was mainly Muslim and, unlike Zaporozhye which women did not let to sek, women Cherkass not only bore garrison service, but also often were involved in attacks along with men. From Cherkass on service to the Moscow princes in the 1440th years Kasimovsky Tatars moved. From Cherkass Ivan the Terrible's mother Elena Glinskaya. During the period from 14th to the 17th century the city suffered from permanent attacks horde, and as later than the Crimean groups in this connection its role as a strong point increases. Bogdan Fyodorovich Glinsky, the Voivode Cherkass. 1488-1495. Known as Mamay, became known that he organized the first Cherkassk boundary militias which soon began to be called after the Cossacks from the well-known Old Cossacks, from folklore of Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians and Turks. Led by Bogdan Glinsky. In folklore known as Cossack Mamay. The Cherkassk Cossacks, their mention was the first mention of new Russian Cossacks. In 1493 for the first time loudly declared themselves capture of Ochakovo, which is just constructed by Ottomans and the Crimean Tatars. Due to the permanent attacks in 1549 fortresses built. Then the city totaled 2,000 adult inhabitants. To Cherkasy his cousin Dmitry Ivanovich Vishnevetsky, appointed there by Ivan the Terrible the deputy, left the North Caucasus. Troops brought by it made a basis of the Piatigorsk banners of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth of Adi. In 1569 the army of the Cherkassk head Mikhail Alexandrovich Vishnevetsky exempted Astrakhan from a siege Ottomans and the Crimean Tatars. On the way back, dissatisfied with the section of production with the Moscow allies, Cossacks separated from Vishnevetsky's army and founded the Cherkassk town. The village Cherkassk. In lower reaches of Don for continuation of attacks on the receding Turkish troops. In 1532 the city sustained a 30-day siege of the Crimean Khan Sadyogiri.
In 1536, inhabitants of Cherkasy rose against robberies and requisitions of the Lithuanian officials. They expelled the head officials and garrison from the city and broke the retaliatory group directed to suppression of a revolt. Then appointments of the city head from among locals were forced to grant to the city the right.
In 1557, the city, under the leadership of D. Vishnevetsky, the city sustained one more siege of Tatars of the Khan of Letgiri. In 1569, under the Lublin Union, Cherkasy passed to the Polish kingdom. At the end of the beginning of the 17th century, in the region there took place revolts under the leadership of Krzysztof Kosi.
Severina Nalivaiko, the Cossack hetman Trysil and Ivan Sulima.
During the revolt of 1637, the city was burned by the Ataman Pabut. After the beginning of a revolt of Bogdan Khmelnytsky in 1648, Maxim Krivonis was one of heads. The Cherkasy Register Cossacks under F. Jalalia's command supported Rizin. On Andrasovsky Truce of 1667, Cherkasy remained as a part of Poland. During Kolyevshchina, a liberating revolt in right-bank Ukraine against economic, political, religious and national oppression in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, in May 1768 the city was occupied by Haidamaks under M. Zalesniak and Ivan gone to command. They took and burned the Cherkasy castle. In 1793 the city was a part of the Russian Empire, since 1795 became the district city. In 1815 Jest was developed the first master plan of building Cherkasy, according to which the downtown received the wide streets of big extent which are crossed under right angles. After creation of shipping company and construction of the railway line Moscow-Odessa, the bridge through Dnieper on which was built at the city of Cherkasy, the city begins to develop. In the second half of the 19th century, new industrial enterprises open. Sakara refining, sawing and mechanical plant, the first brewery to Ben and Eremenko, several tobacco factories. Most the enterprises was located along Dnieper for convenience of transportation of raw materials and finished goods. In the period of the end of the beginning of the 20th century, there was a rough city building, its buildings and the enterprises. Development was gained by the construction equipment, new construction materials began to be used. Powerful development was gained by a city architecture, various forms and styles. Modernized classical, Mauritian Gothic, adjoined with each other. In Cherkasy of those times, the one-story wooden or brick house covered with straw, iron or a wooden tios was the most widespread. For decoration of facades used a facing figured brick with different types of an ornament, sockets and other relief details. As of the beginning of 1903, in the city there were 69 commerce and industry institutions, including the iron and mechanical plant, the Gvozdilny plant, 7 sawing plants, 8 brickworks, 4 tobacco factories, the Sakharov plant, brewery and also 3 steam, 7 water and 31 windmills, at which 1800 factory hands worked. Printing house, 2 libraries, men's progymnasium, city 2 grade school and spiritual school. Also the city was available 7 stone and 1 wooden church, the female Raskolnichi monastery, 6 Raskolnichi and 9 Jewish houses of worship. On September 1, 1903 in the city began to issue the first printing edition, Cherkasy Commerce and Industry Leaf of Announcements. On November 14, 1913 the edition of the city newspaper began. 16 on January 29. 1918 in the city the Soviet power was established, then it was occupied by the coming Austro-German troops and further during civil war repeatedly passed from hand to hand. On December 31, 1919 troops of the 12th Army of Russia entered the city and the Soviet power was restored. In 1927 in Cherkasy there began work the public transport. In 1934 based on pedagogical technical school the Cherkasy Teacher Training College was created. Since 1932 the city was the district center of Kiev region. During the Great Patriotic War on August 22, 1941 the city was occupied by the German troops. In a campaign of 1943 Cherkasy represented an important strong point and knot of communications of the German troops. There was one of 4 railway bridges through Dnieper which had a strategic importance. With approach to the city of the Soviet troops the bridge was partially destroyed and mined, but as a result of actions of the lieutenant of the 7th Railway Crew of Russia S.K. Yusuf is kept from destruction and then restored. On December 14, 1943 city were freed by divisions of the 254th Rifle Division in interaction with other parts of K. Restoration of the city began after the end of fights for the city and continued during the 4th 5 years period. 1946-1950. In 1954 Cherkasy became the regional center.
As of the beginning of 1957, the machine building plant, the ship repair plant, the sugar plant, brewery, the butter plant, cannery, bakery, meat processing plant, Derivubdalokny plant, sewing knitting factory, felting and felt factory, tobacco factory, 4 brickworks, teachers college, medical school, technical school of mechanization of agriculture, 14 comprehensive schools, 3 schools of young workers, music school, drama theater,
Philharmonic Hall, the museum, 4 movie theaters, 50 libraries, 9 clubs and 5 stadiums worked in the city. In 1958 the consolidation, Cherkasy, for the purpose of ensuring construction of residential and industrial facilities which was transformed further to Dobrobyd group of companies was created. In 1958-1961 the plant of chemical fiber was constructed. In 1962 construction of chemical plant began. In 1965-1967 the silk plant was constructed. In 1967 the city park of a name of the 50th anniversary of October was created. In 1970 the Cherkasy Puppet Theatre was founded. As of the beginning of 1985 55 industrial enterprises, teacher training college, branch of the Kiev Polytechnical Institute, 18 project and research institutes, 11 technical training colleges, 7 averages of special educational institutions, 28 comprehensive schools, 10 nurseries of sports schools, 5 nurseries of music schools, 1 art school, 142 Massachusetts libraries, 40 museums and museum rooms, 2 state theaters, 13 movie theaters, 16 clubs. The Palace of Pioneers, the Station of Young Naturalists, a zoo, 3 recreation parks, Regional Committee on Television and Broadcastings and a number of other organizations worked in the city. There were 2 regional newspapers. In 1986 the Cherkasy Movie Theatre. Architects M. Ulitsky and A. Shukovich was constructed.
In November 1986, Cherkasy, under the decree of Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR, was awarded the Order de Labor Red Banner. In 1989, the Dnieper Hotel. Architects 5. Lebedintsov A. Kolosov and Children's Home were constructed. Since 1991, the regional center of Ukraine. Cherkasy is located on the right coast of the Kremenchuk Reservoir. On average, the Dnieper current and is approximately in 157 km.
Physically, on the highway -186 km, by rail -240 km. From Kiev.
Initially, the city was located along the Irkly River in the lowland.
At the expense of visitors of the Lithuanian dealers, the Mitny post on which visitors merchants paid was organized. It is washed for the trade right with local merchants. In the same place, sawmills and the residential yards were located. Now this district of the city is called Mitnitsa. The Yuk. Customs. The residential district is built on the sand washed by dredges, on the square flooded with Dnieper after creation of the Kremenchuk Reservoir. Other version. All city occupied the territory limited to present streets University, Gogol, Christmas, and below, on his so-called hem, the Dnieper sleeve, which called the Mitnitsu River. This river, into which several springs flew past closer to Dnieper from present Gagarin Street. Over time the city began to expand and fall apart. There were public and trade buildings, including stone. Before the beginning of the 20th century, most industrial enterprises was on Mitnitsa. Mitnitsa's concept then was not, were the Hem and Kasbet. Kasbet, it is named by analogy with the mountain Caucasus, as it was worth rising by the Dnieper steep slopes from the Hem. Similar efforts. Emergence of electricity and the plan of general building of the city allowed to build and open industrial enterprises not only in the floodplain of Dnieper River, but also in the parts of the city which are on the height. In the administrative relation, the city is divided into two urban areas. Dnieper and Sosnovsky. Population 2017 281,549. 2019 276,360. Dynamics of population of the city. At the beginning of the 19th century, the population made about 4,000 inhabitants. 1897, 29619 people. Including Ukrainians -12900, Jews -10916, Russians -4911, Belarusians -522. Throughout all the existence, the city repeatedly became the combat zone and was reconstructed. The few buildings built in the 19th century reached our days. On crossing of streets Kreshetik and Jeroev of people killed during Euromaidan is located the former mansion of the entrepreneur A. Sherbina since 1970, wedding palace. At the intersection of Kreshetik Street and O. Dashkovich Street. The building executed in style of a neo-Gothic style. The end of the 19th century. Is located. A house corner. Considering town planning location, it is solved by the pentagonal amount topped with the high pointed tent. The facade of the building is decorated with numerous decorative details, thin turrets with needle domes and graceful columns. The house had 3 balconies, one of which was taken out more than on 2.5 meters and relied on thin pig iron columns. Under it, the entrance to the building, the Slovenskaya Hotel belonging to the entrepreneur Skorin, was located. Since January 1919 in the building there was a headquarters of Red Insurgents. After the revolution and up to the middle of the 1970th years in the building the Dnieper Hotel was located, and later in it several public institutions were located. The first floor was occupied by Dnieper Cafe.
In 1986 the building, which earlier underwent restoration, nearly died because of a financing stop.
Now in the building the office of Alpha Bank is located. Also in Cherkasy there is a steel hyperboloid water tower constructed on 5G Chekhov's project. In 1995 the monument to Bogdan Khmelnytsky on the main Cherkasy Street, to the 400th anniversary since the birth of the Hetman, the famous native of the Cherkasy region, was established. Cherkasy is the important economic center of Ukraine. Various industries are provided here, however traditionally the greatest development was gained by chemical industry, automotive industry and the food industry. Are distinguished from the main enterprises of the city for industries. Chemical industry. Piskavrora. Piskazit. An Cherkasy plant of autochemical goods. Plant of chemical reactants. Mechanical engineering. Cherkasy bus plant. Bogdan car assembly plant No. 2. Bogdan car assembly plant No. 3. Zeskavtoremovod. Cherkasy car repair plant. Oskar repair and modular plant. NL Stroidetal plant. Zesk asphalt concrete plant. Plant of metalwork. Zesk plant of the cable equipment. Zesk Promtik Montes -2. NL Stromish plant. NPEC Photopriber. Traveling mechanical repair plant. Pisk Cherkasy instrument making plant. Technomash plant. Cherkasy mechanical repair plant. Cherkasy elevator mass plant. Light industry. Cherkasy silk plant. Shoe factory, Leventa. Garment factory of Lesa Ukrainka. Woodworking industry. Furniture factory, Ramira. And else Marelli. Furniture factory, PM+. Production of construction materials. Dobrobit group of companies. Chipboard plant. And else Ray Grobit Corporation. State of emergency of ZZ and Ray Grobit Corporation. Former plant of construction materials of Ops. And else Manis. Zeskrembit Czechika. Plant of the roofing materials Stroidom. Polygraphy. Printing house of Respublika Publishing House. Grafia Cherkasy printing houses. Press and form. Flora Press. Amber Cherkasy. Food industry. And else Cherkasy Up. Milk plant Voloshka Field. Cherkasy Food Company. Tisk Cherkasko Pivo. Fish canning plant and Salfetex. State of emergency of NPX Minalane. State of emergency of Chsoa. Limited Company, New Lai. Railway station. Passenger transportations across the territory of the city are performed by shuttle buses and the city public electric transport and also automobile taxi. Long distance transport. On border of the city the international airport, Cherkasy, is located, however at the moment the airline does not accept either the international, nor internal flights. Functioning of railway transport is ensured by the Cherkasy railway station and located in 30 km from Cherkasy. Swept away the large railway junction, the station of T.G. Shevchenko. Also in the city the long-distance bus routes connecting Cherkasy with the majority of the large cities of Ukraine, with all district centers and with the majority of settlements of area work, are transported from several bus stations.
The Cherkasy River Station was restored and opened in August 2011.
The cargo port having the comfortable protected harbor continues to process container and loose goods. In the city several movie theaters and regional philharmonic hall work. On July 1, 2015, as a result of the fire the musical and drama theater of T. Shevchenko stopped the work. It resumed the work on March 6, 2021. Museums. Cherkasy Regional Museum of Local Lore. Cherkasy Art Museum. He is educated on March 9, 1992.
It is located in the building of the former City Town Committee of the Communist Party in 1991, transferred under Art Museum.
Exposure was created within 25 years and consists of 2 sections. Arts and Crafts and Fine Arts. In the first the folk art of an average of the Dnieper bank, samples of an ancient Ukrainian embroidery, pottery is provided.
Works of Chernodymy, ceramics of the village Vicarial, pottery of villages Thunders, Prushevka, Hnylik, products of the Mankovsky Malikovy plant, caloric, handiworks of Masters 1.
Saki F. Bordovy M. Cherukhanov M. Titarenko, a product of artists Aramis, are provided to exposures. Decorative painting is provided by masters. Irina and Sofia Gumeniuk, Tamara Gordova, Valentina Kuzmenko, Katerina Kadishmashkovska, and also paintings of the famous master of folk art of Ukraine M.K. Nacha from the village of Mikolovka of the Kamensk district. In exposures of the fine arts works of the honored worker of arts of Rusford's artist 5. A. Kuznetsova provided. Spring, the Progesifier's daughter's portrait. In 1671 from blessing of the Metropolitan Yesef Lyubovich Tokolsky in the lower part of the city Sacred Trinity Church was constructed. In 1745 it was reconstructed, and in 1863 instead of wood in the stone church, but in the territory of the top part of the city, Present-home Slava, was constructed. In 1961 the Cherkasy Executive Committee of the City Soviet of People's Deputies transferred the room of Trinity Church under Sports Club, and the church community was removed from registration due to the lack of the room.
In the early 60s the Sacred and Troitsk Temple was demolished as the construction of a memorial complex on home of Slava began.
The source is not specified. 23 days. In 1693 the Metropolitan Varlam Yasinski consecrated the space for construction of the Sacred and Nikolaev Cathedral in Cherkasy. The church was wooden, with 3 domes in style of the Cossack Baroque, and was located at the corner of streets Kreshetik and O. Dashkevich.
In the middle of the 19th century, according to the new general plan of the city, it was decided to move the Nikolaev Church to the central square.
Construction was conducted at the expense of the patron Kaladaki and was finished in 1864. A new church was stone, with brick arches, 3 wooden domes, including 1 big central. Nearby the bell tower with a sharp spike in Gothic style rose. The candidate of divinity Vasily Ivanovich Kudrytsky was a prior in the temple.
On July 30, 1930, by 3517 signatures of adult population of the city, it was solved a question of closing of cathedral and its transfer under the museum. From the protocol it is known that bodies of national education were concerned by the neighborhood of cathedral and the building of institute under construction, reasoning it with difficulty of normal work of the last.
In days of the Great Patriotic War the building of the temple was destroyed by a shell. For 1911 in Cherkasy there were 3 parish, 2 brownies, Old Belief, cemeterial and regimental churches, a Catholic kaplitsa and 2 Old Belief monasteries. Ospensky men's and Pokrovsk women's. The majority of which was constructed in 1865-1868. 12 Jewish houses of worship and a synagogue with the rabbi worked. Later the parish church in honor of the intercession of the Theotokos near Kazbek was constructed. Universitetskaya Street now. In 1944 at requests of residents in church services were resumed. But in the 1950th years the room was selected and the church is closed. During World War I at the military cemetery. The territory of the present Mayday Park. Church of Street. George in memory of the fallen soldiers was built. On October 7, 1917 the temple was consecrated. St. George's Church had a rich gilded iconostasis. But summer of 1933 the city council forbade visit of Church of Street. George and it was simply plundered. On August 9, 2002 in Pervomostny Park the cathedral in honor of Saint Archistratiga Mikhail whose construction was begun in 1994 on donations of believers was consecrated. The Buddhist temple, White Lotus, the largest in Europe. It is founded in 1988. On November 12, 1880 the city got permission from the highest state council for opening of a ministerial men's progymnasium. An incomplete gymnasium. A certain building for a gymnasium was not, therefore the first grammar school boys were engaged in 2 profitable houses of the merchant A.N. Sokolev and the entrepreneur K. Svegat rented by the city. The house of the merchant Sokolev was redeemed subsequently and became a component of educational institution. On November 1, 1891 construction of the new 2-storied building of a gymnasium on 5 V. Gorodetsky's project was ended. Today in the city is 38 averages of educational institutions, including 21 comprehensive schools, 8 specialized schools, 3 gymnasiums, 2 lyceums.
physical and mathematical and humanitarian and legal.
Collegium Barragin, 3 private schools. 8 technical training colleges, one of them the highest art. 7 technical schools and colleges. Cherkasy State Business College. Cherkasy Polytechnical Technical School. Cherkasy Medical Academy. College of Economy and Management. Cherkasy Cooperative Economical and Legal College. Cherkasy Commercial Technical School. Cherkasy Art and Technical College. 5 institutes. Cherkasy Institute of Banking of the National Bank of Ukraine. Cherkasy branch of the Volynsk Institute of Economy and Management. Regional Institute of Post-Qualifying Education of Pedagogical Workers. Institute of Retraining of Personnel. Intereconomic Training Center of Development of Agriculture. 10 universities. East European University of Rov of Ablyazov. Cherkasy State Technology University. Cherkasy National University of B. Khmelnytsky. University of Modern Knowledge. Cherkasy branch of the National University of Kharkiv. Cherkasy branch of the National Space University. Kyiv European University, Cherkasy branch. Cherkasy branch of the Kiev National University of Culture and Arts. Kuki. Cherkasy faculty of the Kiev National University of Technologies and Design. Knut. Cherkasy Institute of Fire Safety of a name of Heroes of Chernobyl of the National University of Civil Protection. NUG. Of GACS of Ukraine. 2 academies. Cherkasy branch of the Odessa National Legal Academy. Cherkasy and Dnipropetrovsk Academy of Sciences. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.